Hi and welcome to Dan's Shed. This is my latest project. It's a Mobike, believe it or not. There's a few of these on YouTube at the moment. I saw one of these a few years ago in London and tried to buy one, and I had no chance of finding one as they were hire bikes. I didn't realise at the time. Since then they've become quite abundant. I picked this up for about 100 quid. Since then they've become cheaper. I always thought it'd make the building blocks of a very good project. Right, well the first thing I decided to do was see if it would take inflatable tyres. I think they described them as, not run flat, but what's the word, puncture-proof tyres. Basically they're as good as solid. Though they'll last forever and never get punctures, they're very hard. They give a very bumpy ride. And they're actually quite skinny. Now, these are the original rims, which are cast aluminium and really quite well made. Right, and what I had to do was do a bit of research, and I found that there are actually 24-inch standard rims, which can take an inflatable tyre provided you have a valve hole, which they do not. So I don't know if you can see this very well, but that is a valve hole, which I put in with nothing more than a manual milling machine. I'm a machinist by trade. You probably could do it with a pistol drill if you were very skillful, very careful. But what I've done, I've drilled through the rim here from the top. And I've done that with a 1/4-inch drill to give clearance for a valve which has the Presta type valves, which are much smaller than the bigger Schrader ones. The thickness here is only 10 millimeters. So I thought the Schrader valve would be the best bet. I drilled through, as you can see, but it gets more scant here in the casting. And it breaks through. I intended to do that. You could leave it, it wouldn't be a big problem. But I wanted it to look a bit more professional. So what I did, while it's in a milling machine, clamped to the side of a Bridgeport. Those of you who know what I'm talking about. I'm not teaching Granny to suck eggs, and those of you who don't, it's not as clever as it sounds, but it's not beyond the wit of a man to do it. You clamp it to a milling machine, and you can drill from this side, and then counterbore with an 8mm cutter. I did that about 12 millimeters deep, and then insert into that a piece of aluminium bar, which I've turned down on a lathe to just oversize about 8.02 millimeters, and press that in with a bit of Loctite retaining compound. So that'll never come out. This is as good as permanent, and just cleaned off the top there. I drilled through that piece of dowel before I put it in. That now looks like the casting. Once you sandblast that lightly and then spray it, it looks like nature intended it to be an inflatable tyre rim. And as they say on Blue Peter, here's one we did earlier. Give me a moment. The effect I wanted was to have inflatable tyres of considerably larger size. And these are about as big as you want to get. So, I don't know if that's clear from here. I've got my shed goggles on again. The rim now sprayed looks like it was cast and intended to by, a professional manufacturer. There's our Presta valve. A little bit long, but you can get shorter ones, I think. That's not going to bother us. As I say, these were lightly sandblasted and powder coated. No, they weren't. They were just sprayed with, what's that stuff? Plastic coat. I'm going to get the others powder coated. Big mean rubbers. Look at those. Sizing can be critical. I'll go into that later when it's assembled and you can see what I'm talking about. But that was the main thing, inflatable big tyres, to make it into sort of a tracker. That's the idea. Right, the rest of it, it shed quite a bit of mass. I'll cut to the end of the chase here. We've shed 10 kilograms. This is what we've taken off. This is what we've put on and retained. So we've shed 10 kilograms and put 5 back on, so I guess that makes 5. It's lighter and I think a lot more rigid, and certainly looks better. We'll see that later on. Right, the next thing I wanted to do was convert the front end to disc brake. Now I was dismayed after buying it for a short period because I thought they had disc brakes front and back. And I was driving home along the dual carriageway and looking in my rearview mirror at my new prize. And I looked at the disc brake on the front. I don't know if I was doing this because I nearly crashed into the car in front of me, but the front disc brake, I thought, that's never been used. Of course, there's a reason for that. It isn't a disc. It's pretending to be one. Now the front brake is in fact a drum brake. That's the original mechanism. And very narrow, but I must say it works very, very well. It works like a brick wall. But I thought, as it has a disc brake on the rear, as you can see over there, there's the assembly in the hub, cable calipers. I thought, well, I want one on the front, so the next job would be convert to disc brake. Right, I looked on eBay for discs for bicycles, and I went square-eyed, looking at about 100 million of them. And I thought, well, why don't I just pick the original Mobike equipment? So the chap I bought the second set of wheels from sold me a disc and a caliper. Now, the disc has already been screwed to this centre boss which I made. This hub here is what houses the bearings for the front wheel. It originally had this part, the drum, screwed into here. So I've had to manufacture this part here, which you can do on a manual lathe. That's a standard disc. It costs about £10.50 including postage. And I thought if I go for the original equipment, if you ever need parts, well, it's the same as the back end. As the wheels are identical fore and aft, so could the discs and calipers be. So that's what I went for. Right, now the caliper is on a bracket which I made along the similar lines as to the brake anchor of the drum system. So we can anchor it in the same place on the front arm. To keep things simple, it'll go something like that. Sorry, it goes that way, Dad. The caliper sits on the front. The brake anchor is here. And the caliper, because of the way the cable's orientated, it'll be difficult to have it behind. And I thought, well, Honda did it that way in the 1970s, so it's good enough for me. So the caliper now sits at the front of the front arm. That's simply a piece of 8mm aluminium plate. That's done on a manual milling machine. You could do it on a CNC, or you could even hand make it with a hacksaw and file. Done that a bit over the top, but it doesn't need to be like that. Again, the caliper's brand new. Say pennies. So it's just a quick and dirty project. There's our front arm, which is built like a Brunel bridge. I don't think that'll be any problem with the disc brake's performance. I think that'll be okay. As I say, the drum brake was fantastic, but I wanted discs because I'm building a little project here, and I thought I've been conned here. It can't have a drum at the front. Right. Right. What else did I do? I wanted the whole thing to look like a sort of a 22nd century BMX. So I was delighted to find that this stem here was a standard setup diameter. All I had to do was make a spacer to add to it. This bracket, which I bought on eBay, is a lovely addition to these extended BMX bars. They're deeper and wider than standard equipment. I don't know why. I don't really give a damn either. Right, so that will now fit to my standard neck, like so. Well, the rest will be history, but anyway, right. I'll go into this more in depth later when I assemble it finally. So it's just a quick, dirty project because some thieving bastard stole my mountain bike, which I've had for 20 years, was worth all of 10 pence. As I thought, as I'm going to get a new bicycle, it can't be anything normal. So, the project commences. The frame, right, has been chopped about a bit. We've moved quite a bit from it. Most of that's over there on the left. Part of it's cast, part of it's tubular, welded, fabricated. Let's say it's not a cheap job. You know, this must have cost a few quid. One can only guess at how much. That's the shaft casing there. And there's the shaft, as you can see. The primary bevel is over there. I mean, you know, that must have cost a few quid to produce. And, surprise, surprise, though it's made in Beijing, I recognise those initials. Is that General Motors? I don't know, one can only guess. Right. They seem to have their fingers in many pies, don't they? Right. Yes, the frames had quite a bit removed from it, and first to go was the locking mechanism, which, though very clever and high-tech, is a bit beyond my logic, but is very heavy and doesn't work anymore, so that was first for the chop. There's about 3 kilograms there. That was seated there and had a big bracket beneath it, which I've chopped off and filed back and brushed that up so you could hardly tell it was there. So that was got rid of. Sadly the stand went because it's very heavy again, and it was placed in a position that made it look like a Honda Melody, and it got in the way, and it's going to be a scant, cut down machine, so that went as well. Maybe that was a bit of a hurry, I don't know. The handlebars I got rid of because I wanted the BMX style ones. The basket went because it looked like a post office bike. Mudguards hit the new big tyres, so they had to go. The lights are no longer going to be fitting for this project because that's solar powered. God knows how it works. And this one is powered by a dynamo. Now that really is a gem, but as I say, the project I'm producing is going to be something slightly different. In the rear hub is a dynamo. I mean, this thing is really beautiful quality. It really is. It must have cost a fortune. That sat in there, and that's nearly a kilogram there. I'm going to have battery lights. So that had to go for lightness. This component here, which sat on the outside of it, right here, is in fact an accumulator, storing the power from the dynamo. That was based on a screwed-to plate, which was part of this casting. So I got rid of that, and I cut the plate off and machined this back. So it brings the size and mass down. It had the appearance of a GS 650 shaft drive, and I didn't want that, so all that went. Right, so now the weight's coming down, and we're getting more high-tech. The last main thing I wanted to do to it was to have a crossbar to give the appearance, as I say, of a futuristic BMX. That was one of the biggest challenges, really. My brother, who's a fabricator, said, "You're not going to get away with welding this, because if you do, you're going to destroy it. It'll make a mess." And I thought of a way to go around that. What I've done, I've got a piece of thin wall aluminium tube here, 50 millimeters diameter, and the ends are offcuts of 2-inch aluminium solid bar that I scrounged from work. They're turned on a lathe, and if you can see that join line there, that'll get polished out later, but these are turned down like a top hat effect, and are pushed in with some retaining compound just to hold them in place. I was quite surprised how well these frames are made. These tubes are dead parallel. This fits like a glove. It took a bit of doing to get the length right. And this is going to sit in between the two tubes as my fake crossbar. And inside there is a tie bar. Not the bar you go drinking in Thailand, but a bar to tie the two ends together. No, my jokes are crap, right? Right, that'll go in there. It's all pulled together. There's a thread tapped in either end. And the idea is, right, this will now become a crossbar that will fit into the frame, hopefully. There we go. So you can see the tubes are perpendicular and very parallel. Once the thing's brushed up, so, yeah, the expert eye could tell it's not a proper frame, but I didn't really give it a toss. Right, when our tube's inside there, we have 2 profile washers that I made. These go inside the tubes. It's a pain in the bum to get it in there, in the tube somewhere, if you can see that. Inside this tube is a hole, and my huge fingers can just get down in there and get this in by, a few turns an hour. The front is more accessible because you have a hole. You can see the ball-ended Allen key will go in there, and you can do that up. And I'm sure it's not too high-tech to understand. When the tube's under tension with this bolt here, when this one's done up, you needn't tighten this one. it'll pull it all taut together and make this, under compression, and hopefully hold it tight. So there we have it. Oh yeah, forgot to mention, when this tube is perpendicular to here, it brings it down at an angle, which looks terribly trendy and modern, but this tube was sticking up here by about 6 inches. Now, as this frame is designed to fit any person, I'm 5'10", and with my feet flat on the ground, at crotch height, the saddle's on the lowest level. The frame's sticking up this far, so I thought, well, I'll chop 3 inches of it off to make it, and then have the saddle sticking out of it, which makes it look more like a BMX. There's a clamp somewhere for the saddle. Where the hell's that? Oh, there. Simply to make it more aesthetically pleasing. And it does, I think. The saddle, the other thing I had to remove from this frame, had this wonderful mechanism for adjusting the height, simply because if you're hiring a bike, you don't have a kit of tools on you to up and down the saddle. So we had this wonderful mechanism over here, which had a cam inside and a locking mechanism to sort of pull the saddle up and down and lock it. Great, but really high quality again, but couldn't fit that down the tube with my special profile washer that holds the frame together. So that had to go as well. So what I did, I bought a piece of tube here, pressed the saddle into it with some stud lock again. It's not coming out. Original clamp is there. Made this top hat thingy with a slit in it, which clamps around there. The old-fashioned way, like an old Raleigh Nottingham. It's low tech, but it works. To retain the same diameter, I put this bung at the end. And that slot there was done on a manual milling machine. That then escapes my special profile washer. So it's all a bit of an afterthought, but it sort of works. So that's the story so far. There'll be an assembly video another time. Hopefully I can get on with it. But yeah, it wasn't going to be a too lengthy project, but I'm quite pleased with it. It's quite an interesting one, this one. As I say, it must have been a huge expense to produce this, first off. There's a glut of these things around, so, it's quite an easy, cheap project, and you end up with quite a nice result, as you'll see later on. So, stay tuned, and I'll see you another time.